Today we will be discussing one of the greatest reversals in medical history, peptic ulcers. Previously, people believed that stress was the main cause of peptic ulcers. Thus, people frequented psychiatrists to relieve their stress and also to keep their life straight so that they don't have more stress. Antacids were prescribed to people to relieve the symptoms of peptic ulcers, and these antacids included Tagamet and Zantac. Also, HCl was believed to be too harsh for the bacteria to live in by the scientists who were researching peptic ulcers. Things would change, however, in the early 1980s. Then, a certain strain of bacteria was discovered to be present in all cases of peptic ulcers observed by Dr. Robin Warren of the University of Western Australia in Perth. His protege, Dr. Barry Marshall, cultivated a sample of this bacteria over Easter. Then it was discovered that this was an unknown species of bacteria that they named Helicobacter pylori. However, when Dr. Marshall and Dr. Warren published their results, they were met with much resistance. Scientists thought that they were wrong because bacteria like H. pylori they believed could not survive at such acidic conditions like in the stomach. These bacteria were termed opportunists by these scientists because they believed that these bacteria took advantage of certain favorable situations in the stomach. Also, companies ignored their discoveries because that would not be helpful for them as they would lose their money if a cure for a chronic disease like peptic ulcers would be found. This is because the research was funded by companies that made these drugs like Tagamet and Zantac, which would only relieve the symptoms and not cure them. Thus, the research that was funded by them focused more on stress as the cause and not on bacteria. As expected, when Dr. Marshall and Dr. Ward heard about this resistance, they were not happy. To overcome the opportunistic argument, Dr. Marshall deliberately infected himself with H. pylori. He then started suffering from peptic ulcers, treated himself with a course of antibiotics, and then subsequently got cured of the disease. Subsequently, Dr. Marshall and Dr. Warren kept fighting and showed more evidence that it was a bacteria which caused peptic ulcers. Other scientists also tested this and found it was true. One of those scientists was Dr. David Perra of UVA over here. The current state. The CDC declared that in 1991 that peptic ulcers were caused by Helicobacter pylori, and now antibiotics like amoxicillin, clarithromycin, metronidazole, and levofloxacin treat it. Also, Dr. Marshall and Dr. Warren received the Nobel Prize for the discovery. Here, they are holding their Nobel Prize. Now let's look at the future. So, Dr. Marshall and Dr. Warren's discovery that a bacteria was the cause of a chronic disease like peptic ulcers started more questions. One of them was that are other chronic diseases caused by bacteria? For example, could arthritis, Crohn's disease, or diabetes, three major chronic diseases, be just caused by bacteria and could be cured by antibiotics? And also, this posed another question. Because of the over-prescription of antibiotics, it could be possible that H. pylori could become antibiotic resistant, which means that we would have to find a new way to fight this superbug. And here are my sources.